I remember my dad and mom one Sunday taking after church, whispering to each other, and then taking me into the room in our house that had my dad's organ, like his jazz organ. We had a piano and we also had the jazz organ. So he'd go on and play all these amazing sort of like thick chords. And they started having me match pitches to that. And then they would whisper, and then they would match pitches and then whisper. So I didn't really understand what was going on. But later I would find out that it was because, they were recognizing that I had a voice, which probably wasn't a shock to them because everybody in our family could sing. I mean, everybody can. I have a cute little voice, honestly, compared to the rest of my aunts and my grandmother.
This cute little voice is Audra McDonald. But you may already know that because her voice is recognizable like that. She's a household name. The 53-year-old is also the winner of 6 Tony Awards, 2 Grammys, and an Emmy. And I haven't even touched on her activism yet, like how she's one of the founders of Black Theater United, an organization that works to combat systemic racism within the theater community. Or how she's featured on Singing You Home, a bilingual children's album designed to aid families separated at the border. Earlier this summer, I had the immense privilege of sitting down with Audra for a conversation. And while we don't make a habit of interviewing celebrities here on Homegoings, because this is a place for everyone's stories, Audra intrigued me. Because besides her multi-dimensional career on Broadway, on opera stages, in film and television, private practice, anyone? Audra is a bit of a truth teller, to say the least. I had a feeling we would just sit down as 2 Black women do and talk about the stuff of life. My instincts were right.
I've done concerts, a lot of concerts in a lot of white space. And what's interesting is how sometimes, I think audiences are very comfortable with me, and I let my guard down. I tell them who I am, and there's no haughty distance. I let myself be me.
From Vermont Public, this is Homegoings. I'm Myra Flynn. Today on the show, a conversation with the Audra McDonald, artist.
Lying all alone, I'm thinking, staring at the stars. I wonder, since
activist.
How can we get rid of AP African American history when it's actually American history?
And a talent we might not have ever even heard.
My parents were trying to find ways to channel my energy in a way that could be as constructive as possible and to resist the use of medication.
This is Homegoings. Welcome home. When I think about the worlds in which you have lived in, the scope is so broad, but I think a lot about the theater world, the opera world. It's typically being places, white spaces and white glorified spaces. And then here you are, just, what is it, like 6 Tonys? Were you put into this world or did you seek it out?
I like to say that I was basically kind of born into it. There was so much music in my family and in my house, My grandmothers were both piano teachers. My maternal grandmother got her master's degree in music in Mississippi and then was a piano teacher. And my dad's sisters sang. They sang a lot in church as the McDonald sisters. And my dad played a million instruments, as did my uncle. And so I was just surrounded by music at all times. And we all were put into piano lessons. I think I started piano when I was 4 or 5. And I, classically, but the music around the house was everything from opera to soul, to jazz, to gospel, all of it. I guess that's why I say I was born into it, because I was diagnosed as a hyperactive child and I was always singing all of the time. My parents were trying to find ways to channel my energy in a way that could be as constructive as possible and to resist the use of medication.
When do you know from your folks, like when they recognized that you were having, I think you called it like hyperactivity, like hyperactive tendencies? Did your folks describe kind of what was going on with you then?
Oh, they've described it to me, but I also remember what I was feeling. And it was interesting. I had attended basically an all black kindergarten, which was really close to the high school where my dad worked and where his father had worked, which was on the black side of town, good old redlining. So in the west side of Fresno, where most of the black community lived. And then my parents moved out of our one house and tried to buy another house. And everybody in the neighborhood wrote a letter to the realtor letting them know that they didn't want black people moving into that neighborhood. So we did not buy that house. We ended up buying another house, which was in the northern part of Fresno. And we switched schools, and I ended up going to my church's. My church had a school attached to it, and so my parents put me into that school for first, second, and third grade. And there were not a lot of black kids. There was only one other black family in that school, and I flipped out. And I was very emotional, and they established a crying corner for me in the coats where I would just like have breakdowns. I mean, this is as a first grader, and I cry and they'd say, okay, Audra, go over to the crying corner. And, or I'd try and run away from school, or I couldn't focus in class, or I'd, yell at all the kids on the playground saying, you don't like me because I'm black, and all this. I just was very, very emotional, very anxious, very hyperactive. And at home, I was singing and dancing and, like, as my dad called me, the circus. I was just a never-ending circus. So I remember those feelings and I remember those issues. I knew my parents knew I had this musical ability. And like when I'd sing in church, I would sing louder than any of the other kids in the church choir. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, she's so loud, So it was just a matter of like, what can we do for her to channel this energy, They talked about, she's going to win an Academy Award someday. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So that's, I'm so happy that that's the course that they chose to take.
And so did anybody say like, it's possibly because she's like gone from an all black area to being one of the only black folks in the room? Did anybody recognize that, or did you just feel that and hold that internally?
Well, I think, it was one of the things I was shouting about. But I think, I had another sibling that was at the school too. So they're like, she's fine. What's up here? That one's fine. And because I had exhibited all those tendencies, just in life, and then they were exacerbated into this, maybe that's what I internalized. And then because I had this anxious, hyperactive nature, that's how it, manifested itself in that school. I think they just thought it was more specific to me,
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I think a lot about now the spaces that you're in, where you've gone from having your own crying corner. First of all, I'm very curious if you have any crying corners, self-designated crying corners now, because I feel like we all could use that every once in a while.
We could all use a little crying corner. In those days, I think it was more humiliating. I think about it now. But yeah, I mean, my car as I'm going through the drive-through at Starbucks and, being overwhelmed.
Yeah, a car can be a safe crying corner for sure. But the thread there, right, of being the only one of something in a room to being a powerhouse at being the only one of something in the room and really paving a way so that many people could be a global majority in a room. What does that road look like?
I ended up kind of living in white space for quite a while after that. That was like, I think the shift, if I look at it, and I think this is the first time I'm really sort of verbalizing it and analyzing it at the same time, that as a result of my parents saying, let's find this, let's see if she'll be, do well in this dinner theater. So I auditioned, I got in as an alternate. There was one other Black girl in that theater, at that little junior company troupe. And I remember thinking when they ended up casting another Black girl after me about a year later, I remember thinking, oh God, I'm going to get kicked out because the other girl who was here is no longer here. And now I'm here, but now there's this other Black girl coming in. And in my mind, I was thinking there can only be one of us at a time.
So you were seeing yourself as a quota.
Yeah. So we would do little tiny performances before the big musical that would happen every night. But then there was also, musicals and plays that we could audition to be in. And so in those days, I auditioned for everything that I could possibly do there. But, it's like when they did Sound of Music, I knew that I couldn't audition for Sound of Music. I knew that, like when they did Music Man, I knew that I couldn't audition for Music Man, just to be in the ensemble. Although I did get cast in The King and I as one of the Siamese kids. So it was very strange.
As one of the Siamese kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The royal princes and princesses.
But one thing started to happen as I started to get more and more comfortable being on the stage and having more success in that company as a kid and getting more solos in the little cabarets we were doing before the show. The audiences were starting to take notice. They're saying, that little girl, wow, that little girl's got something. And I remember wanting to audition for The Miracle Worker, which was a play that they were going to do. And my parents told me, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You will not play that little servant slave girl in that show. And if it means you don't get to do that show, that's fine. There will be other things for you to do, but you do not need to play that. You do not need to. And I remember them saying, that's a stereotypical role that is degrading, and you shouldn't do that. And I remember being upset with them at the time, like, but it's a play and I can be. And I'm so happy that they put their foot down in that way. And as a result of that, I think I was raised with a sense of, I'm going to do the roles that feel right for me, not that are predetermined to be right for me because of my skin color, but what feels right for me. And also there was a sense of, and I'll wait. If it means I don't get to do that show because that show it feels degrading for me to do, especially as a child, my parents were like, then you'll wait.
Someone's gonna say, all right now, take a train and go back home. Hop a freight and go back home.
And as a result, I ended up getting cast as Eva Perón in Evita at that dinner theater at 16. And people were, some audience members loved it, and other audience members were like, there's a Black girl playing this role? What do you mean? So that stance and that way of looking at myself as an artist, thanks to my parents forcing me to look at myself through that lens, in all of this white space, well, I'll wait, I think really affected my own sort of identity as an artist.
And then I'm just like crying on Zoom with Audra McDonald. Everything's fine. That's really beautiful. I mean, it's such a privilege. It's that like that privilege that a lot of us miss out on, right? Of being like, I'm going to be patient and wait out for like what I want, because the world is so busy dominating what's best for us, and not believing that we know what's best for us, for our bodies, for our agency, for our voices.
Yeah, for our spirit. And just, I think my parents were like, her being on stage, being like, yes, ma'am, every night. But here's the thing. I don't judge. Those are the only opportunities they had. And so I don't, I see sometimes with younger generations how they look at that time and go, well, it's like, well, no, that's all that they had. That was all that they were allowed to do. So they found whatever agency within themselves while they were doing that and trying to find whatever dignity as they did that, because those were the only choices back then, or to not do it at all. I had the privilege and the luxury. I was also a kid in Fresno, California, for my parents to say, no, we'll wait, and you'll do the thing that's right for you. That's not degrading. Our ancestors and those that came before us, not everybody was afforded that opportunity. And yet they walked in those spaces as dignified and as brilliant as they could still be, And honestly, we don't, of course, Gone with the Wind is the essence of problematic, but some of the most beautiful acting I've ever seen is what Hattie McDaniel does in that film. She's a masterclass, especially in the scene where she's trying to get somebody to get him to let them bury his child. What's his name? To bury his child.
He'd say her neck broke. Mr. Red grabbed his gun and run out there and shoot that poor pony. And for a minute, I think he wanted to shoot himself. Oh, poor Captain Buck. And yes, and Miss Scarlett, she called him a murderer for teaching that child to jump. She said, you give me my baby what you killed. And then he said, Miss Scarlett.
That monologue is so beautiful, and she is so moving. And she was such a beautiful actress. And boy, I wish she had been given the opportunity to really get into play some really beautiful, meaty roles, because what a talent that was, I would hope that younger generations would still continue to understand and recognize and give her flowers for that, and not judge her because of the type of role that it was.
Is there any empowerment or self-empowerment in returning to the maid role? in returning to the stereotypical roles that we have always like turned down and being like, or do you have any examples of trying this out and reclaiming those characters or, you know, those stereotypes and making them shine or brighter or dust the dirt off or more dignified, whatever it may be?
Yeah, well, I think that's, you know, I look at some of the heat, our production of Porgy and Bess on Broadway some years ago got because the Gershwin estate had said to Diane Paulus and to Susan Laurie Parks, dust it off if you need to, so that there's more agency, so that there's more dignity. So yes, I guess to answer your question, I guess, is that a yes? I think there is a way that you can step back into perhaps some of these roles and dust them off, fix them. I'm finding myself being led to a point, to a thought. In the way that we all are taking issue with what's his name is trying to get done down in Florida and literally erase history and erase the teaching of it. I saw a meme the other day that says those who want to erase history want to then repeat it. I mean, there's a reason that they're trying to erase the history. It's because they want to repeat what happened in that history. So in the way that, I don't even want to say his name, is trying to do that, and there are others in other, states that are jumping on the bandwagon. How can we get rid of AP African American history when it's actually American history? It's a part of it. But in the same way, I fear when I sometimes hear like the younger generation wanting to just cancel like the Hattie McDaniels and everything that happened before. Cancel. That we can't do that. We have to honor it and remember it and it happened. There was a period in the history where we were subjugated we still are, but the horrors of the ways and the death by 1,000 cuts of all the ways we were subjugated throughout history, our entire history in this country, must not be erased.
When we come back, Audra longs for softness on stage and at home. Is it okay to go a little deeper and ask you kind of a personal question?
Sure.
That's right after this. Welcome back to Homegoings. I'm your host, Myra Flynn. Today on the show, I'm speaking with acclaimed singer, actor, and activist Audra McDonald about her dedication to finding honor in some of the problematic roles Black people have historically played in the theater world, while also working to change them. For Audra, and many change makers alike, change starts at home. You are married to a white man, yes?
Mm-hmm.
How did these discussions show up in your house with a white husband, or if at all? And kind of backing up from that question, we're in a time that is what I've been calling the post-Floyd era, where this country's in this reckoning space. All sorts of things are coming from that. And I know that the container that I've held my interracial relationships in has shifted. And so it's got me thinking a lot about what's happening in homes where there's folks on either side of the color divide or color line, but maybe share the same values or maybe don't. Has anything shown up for you all recently that wasn't there before?
Yeah, I mean, my husband in particular has had, quite the journey in terms of where he started, who he was, where the culture into which he was born and where he is now. That's because he was, raised Mormon in Salt Lake City, and a lot of that is that, there were words and texts and, in that culture with things like, white and delightsome and dark and loathsome. I mean, they'll talk about that, I know the Mormon church is talking about how they've reformed, and obviously blacks are now allowed priesthood to a degree that they weren't before. That didn't happen until the 70s, I think, or 80, whatever. Anyway, so he readily admits that at the very least, he was born into a culture that was racist, and he was born into a culture that thought certain things, and I don't want to go into like detail, but he was absolutely born into that culture. And, and that being gay was wrong and all of this stuff. So the journey from that for him to him leaving the church, and then the discovery of having to in some ways brainwash himself, to then falling in love with a black woman, it's been an enormous journey for him. So he's been on that journey for a while. So post George Floyd, he's now post George Floyd, he's also the father of a black daughter. Our daughter, she's biracial, but to society, she's black. She is, it's interesting because my older daughter is biracial, and she is, she can pass, she is afforded in some ways white privilege because she doesn't present. If you didn't know, I don't think you would think she was black. And she understands that. She understands very much. She majored in Africana Studies. She just graduated from Brown in Africana Studies. Girl knows her stuff and understands and moves very much in that world in the black world, understanding what she looks like and how the world perceives her. But my younger daughter, this is copy paste. And so my husband has been the one leading the bandwagon on reading everything he can, understanding all the history, correcting himself, correcting his family back at home, in whatever way he can, calling them out. And his family is lovely. They're lovely, but there's a lot of stuff that perhaps they maybe don't see or don't understand. And he is not afraid to call them out and say, you must learn. So, and there's been a lot of, even more self-reflection where he says, oh, babe, I didn't realize that this was something I used to think, or, oh my God, this is something I used to do, or this is whatever it is. And now I see it. Now I understand. So for him, it's been an even bigger awakening, and another part of his journey on the awakening that he's had. I mean, just veils have been lifted left, right, and center for this man since he started his journey away from leaving the church into now I'm married to a black woman, and now I have a black child, and now he's so in some ways he's this maybe sounds strange that sometimes when he starts to get really indignant or angry about something that's happening to black people, or like what's going on down in Florida, or any of the horrific sort of killings, or any of the legislation that's trying to be passed or whatever, or the dog whistles, all of it. Sometimes I let him have the anger, because we get so tired, don't we?
We do.
We're so tired. And especially as Black women, oh no, not so early, am I crying now? We get so tired of having to be strong and hard to either protect us and those around us and continue that fight. And sometimes we just want to be soft, and sit in comfort or ease or peace for a minute. Ooh. So sometimes I give him the anger, and he'll be fuming and upset. And I wonder if sometimes he thinks, why isn't she reacting to this? And it's because it's like, you hold it for a while. And he's willing to do it. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. So, sorry.
Do not ever be sorry. This is just so true. There's this whole movement, just a side note, but a whole movement that maybe you've seen out there. It's a whole hashtag and everything called soft life for Black women. It's gone a little Gucci. It's gone a little like soft life means 12 Gucci bags. But hey, I'm here for it.
That's not soft for me. Whatever soft means for you, go ahead. Be soft.
Go ahead now. Go get your bags.
I saw some person on, I don't know, TikTok or Instagram or something, some white man was like, people ask me, how am I going to vote on this? Or what am I going to think about this? And he's like, what are Black women saying? He's like, that's how I do everything. I follow them. If they say this, if they say we're okay with this, then we're okay. We're not okay. Okay, fine. I'm not doing it. Which I thought was lovely. But it's interesting. And, people, look, I did not plan to meet and fall in love with and marry my husband. That wasn't, you fall in love with who you fall in love with. But I do in a way feel that we were destined to be together, when you think about, soul contracts in terms of what people are going to learn. And given where he started in his journey in life and what he believed and what he thought was true, just that within his heart, just because of what he had been taught, to see where he is now, it's like, yeah, he was supposed to end up becoming the father of a Black girl and the husband to a Black woman in one of the most liberal states in the country. And, all these things, he was supposed to take this journey, and I was supposed to take that journey with him and be a part of that.
I think the constant through line is signing up for the journey with the person, whatever that may be or may look like, but also just that what it is to be loved as a Black person, woman, is really layered.
It is.
It's not easy, and it can mean a lot of like picking up the pieces or showing up for that person the way the world isn't. And so it sounds like your husband is doing this for you, and that's all that matters. And it's still a learning curve. There's still a learning curve, and sometimes I get it wrong, and sometimes he gets it wrong. But we're on the journey, and he also understands that he can't ever be like one of those people who goes, well, it's okay, I can say that. I'm married to a Black person, or I've got a Black. Mm-mm. He understands that is not a privilege. That part of it. Oh, well, I get to do this, or I get a pass. Not at all. Not at all. So he gets it, and he gets that there's still more learning to do.
I know that love is the only answer, and the tightrope lover, the only dancer.
I've done concerts, a lot of concerts in a lot of white space. And what's interesting, I'm always, what's interesting is how sometimes, I think audiences are very comfortable with me, and I let my guard down. I tell them who I am, and there's no haughty distance. I let myself be me, and I talk very openly about my life, and I say, and I talk about what I think and believe in. I don't preach, but the songs that I choose, I sing for specific reasons, and I talk about those reasons that I choose songs and why I'm singing the song. And sometimes when certain people who come to my concerts are reminded that there is still in society a difference in the way I'm looked at and the way they are looked at, sometimes people get uncomfortable, and sometimes I have people get up and walk out. I've had people as recently as a couple weeks ago, as I was singing a song about feeling othered, and it's a song that everybody knows, Being Green, sung by Kermit the Frog. And I said, I dedicate this to those who that are made to feel othered, that are othered by society, that are othered by legislation being created to, sort of erase them, feel that who they are is not enough, or who they are is wrong. I sing this song for you.
It's not that easy being green, having to spend each day the color of the leaves, when I think it could be nicer being red or yellow or gold or something much more colorful like that.
I cannot tell you how many times, and this is deep into the concert, like maybe I've got 4 or 5 songs left. There's always someone who gets up and walks out after that. And I always laugh in my head and think, okay, did you not see what color I was? Did you forget? And I'm one of those people who people could just tend to forget that, I guess. I don't know. Because, I'm up there and I'm singing songs from Great American Musical Theater Songbook, most of which are written by white composers. I absolutely try to find the Black composers and bring them in there. But it's, that's the theater. That's what it is. We're trying to change that. And it is, there is more diversity. It is changing. There's more awareness than there's ever been. So I always expect that that's going to happen. And when it does, I'm like, okay, there's still a leap that some people still need to take, Having said that.
You totally just made a frog pun.
I did. I didn't even mean to. Having said that, 99% of the people stay. And on the flip side of that, I find I did it, in this concert that I did in Wyoming, there was a man in a big old cowboy hat, and I absolutely prejudged him. And I was like, huh. And an older man too, like in his late 60s, and cowboy hat, cowboy boots and everything. And when I walked off stage and I came back on for the encore, he had his fists in the air, just screaming for me. And then somebody brought him backstage afterwards. And he said, he was the stepfather to somebody who brought him backstage. And he was like, that song you sang about how sometimes people feel othered. Thank you. And I was just stunned. I was like, all right, this is why I do it. There's a lot of reasons why I do it. I do it so that little Black girls can see someone that looks like them up on that stage, and I can use my voice for causes and whatnot. Still have, more than anything, I want to have a really human experience. I want us to all walk away from there as humans who have experienced something, have experienced like a holy communication and a communion of a moment, where we check our brains with our hats, we go in, and what we bring are our hearts. And we're all made to feel something. Get in touch with our humanity again. Not erase who we are, but, find the togetherness and the communion in that. And so while there are moments like the people who get up and march out after I sing Being Green, there are more moments of the people who are like, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that here. I've had so many people say, thank you for saying that here and singing that song here and your message. Thank you for your message. And so that makes it all worth it.
You make me want to be your friend, Audra McDonald. I want to follow you everywhere.
You can. We can be friends.
So cool. Yeah, everything you say, pretty amazing. I feel like I had a wonderful and blessed interview with you, and I feel like we covered such a wonderful arc. And I had an interview recently with somebody who's a celebrity. This is now my Audra McDonald. And I am in awe of Audra, not just as an artist, but a big takeaway from this interview for me as a Black woman is that even if we aren't all famous household names, whatever we are doing, we are all doing so much. I mean, when I think about the Black women in my life, they embody the pillars holding up each frame that matters in this world, like love and strength, hope, power. They are the ones holding the world together. Black women are often in the position of comforting others while being leaned on to perform, achieve, and change the world. We are feared less than Black men, so we enter spaces they can't, but those spaces are often dangerous, unhealthy, or, like Audra's stages, sometimes completely homogenized. We are the wound lickers of society. We are the mothers George Floyd called out for. But if Audra freaking McDonald can straddle being a change maker with being a healthy mother, wife, performer, and sometimes even soft Black woman, well, then maybe I can too. And maybe you can too. Maybe we will get our shot at softness. Let someone else carry the pain for a little while. And if not today, maybe someday. This is Some Days, sung by Audra McDonald, with music by Stephen Marzullo and text by the indomitable James Baldwin. It's off her album Go Back Home on None Such Records. If you dare, listen to it softly.
Some days worry, some days glad, some days more than make you mad. Some days more than shine. When you see what's coming undone the line. Some days you say, oh, not me, never. Some days you say, bless God forever. Some days you say, curse God and die. And the day comes when you wrestle with that line. Some days tussle, then some days groan, and some days don't even leave a bone. Some days you hassle all alone. I don't know, sister, what I'm saying, nor do no man if he don't be praying. I know that love is the only answer, and the tightrope lover, the only dancer. When the lover comes off the rope today, the net which holds him is how we pray, and not to gods unknown, but to each other. The falling mortal is our brother. Some days leave, some days grieve, some days you almost don't believe. Some days believe you, some days don't. Some days believe you, and you won't. Some days worry, some days mad, some days more than make you glad. Some days more than shine. Witnesses coming on down the line. Witnesses coming on down the line.
Thank you so much for listening to Homegoings, a righteous space for art and race. It's been a pleasure being here with you today. A special thanks to Kevin Sweeney at the Flynn Theatre in Vermont, who graciously helped to orchestrate this interview with Audra. It felt like a match made in conversation heaven, so thanks for setting us up. And Audra has so much going on. So many more updates, video clips, and causes that I couldn't get into today. So if you want to follow along with her, check out our show notes for a link to her happenings. As per usual, thanks to Elodie Reed, who is the graphic artist behind all of our Homegoings artist portraits. Audra, her strength and her softness, are front and center on this one, so check her out at homegoings.co. While you're there, sign up for our bi-monthly newsletter and give us a follow at We Are Homegoings on Instagram. This episode was mixed, scored, and reported by me, Myra Flynn. I also composed the theme music, other music by Blue Dot Sessions, Audra McDonald. We featured clips from The King and I, Kermit the Frog, and also a little more by me. I couldn't help myself. Brittany Patterson edits the show, and James Stewart always contributes to so many things on the back end of making this thing come to life. See you in 2 weeks for another episode of Homegoings. As always, you are welcome here.
You know, you started this podcast, and I love that you called it Homegoings. That it's interesting, having grown up with, the AME church and the Episcopalian church, and being so different in the way the worship and all of that happened. But there was a part of me when I was really young that when I would go to my grandma's church, the AME church, and the praise and the shouts would happen, sometimes I would get afraid because the feelings were so big. But now as an adult, I look back on it and I was like, and like in Homegoings too, it was as if, here is the space. We are holding you in the space. We are holding space for you. This church, this community is holding space for you to let whatever fly.